What's up, PGF Nation? We are back. Billy Napier fired at Florida. Mike Norvell is next at FSU. We had 9 top 25 teams go down over the weekend. Broncos with a 33-point fourth quarter comeback win. Are the Eagles back? How good are the Colts? The Bears win their 4th straight. We had big wins, upset wins, big rivalry games, a lot to get to. But joining me as always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Listen, I mean, you started off with the best news in all of football, NFL, or college, is that Billy Napier has been fired. The drought will now be over, Florida fan.
Yeah, I knew you were thrilled about that. And look, we'll jump into that in just one bit here. But look, Monday Night Football is currently going on right now. We got the doubleheader going on. We don't have time to wait for the second game to get over with. Just way too late to get this pot out. So Lions Bucks just wrapped a little bit ago. Not a whole lot of takeaways for me, Alex, except what I saw from the Lions was this team came out with their hair on fire. This was a team that you could tell was motivated in a big matchup. I saw a way better effort from this team. You could tell they watched the tape versus KC last week and just didn't like how flat they looked. And I think Dan Campbell had these guys ready to play, especially the defense. They were getting after it. They were putting tons of pressure on Baker Mayfield. They could never get anything going. I think this is a monster win because this game right here could absolutely decide the 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, it's quite possible. I mean, over the past few weeks, and this is my only take on the whole thing, the Buccaneers were primed to lose a game like this. They had been winning too many games, too close. And the theatrics at the end in terms of Baker pulling it out. I mean, still winning. I still believe in this team. To me, this is still the best team in the NFC that I'd bet on to win. Unfortunately, they probably lost Mike Evans for the rest of the year. The news came out that he has a broken collarbone and they don't expect him back for the rest of the year. However, they're still expecting Chris Godwin back. They're still expecting Bucky Irving back. And they're still expecting Jalen McMillan back, all while Emeka Buka is speeding up his learning process and getting more and more comfortable with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, age and injuries, unfortunately, starting to kind of catch up with Mike Evans. I think they're going to be just fine, but this was a motivated Lions team. And at home, on their turf, they're tough to beat. And they came out and really just played a complete football game. Defense looked great. Offense moved the ball. Big time win for them. Look, I want to get to this monster comeback. New York Giants took a 19-0 lead into the fourth quarter and then actually had a 26-8 lead midway through the fourth quarter. This was an all-time collapse. I mean, almost hard to believe. They give up 33 fourth quarter points and then a last-second game-winning field goal. Look, here's my big takeaway on this, though, Alex, from the Giants side of things. The loss for New York actually isn't that big of a deal. And I know it was a huge collapse, and it feels like a gut punch, but this season isn't about wins and losses right now. This season is about, have they found a franchise quarterback? And so far, early sample size here, but so far it looks like they have. Jackson Dart was good in this game, 283 yards, 4 total touchdowns. That last one rushing with 40 seconds left in regulation. Looks like they had wrapped up the win. Obviously, they just left the door open and Denver gets a huge comeback win. But this team, this Giants team, has looked completely different since Dart took over and Scadaboo has been the lead rusher for them. Look, if you're a Giants fan, yeah, it's tough, but I really like the direction of this team, and I really like what I've seen from Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I gotta agree, but I really wanted this win, one, not only for my own personal reasons, but I really thought that they played well enough to win, obviously, because if you listen to anybody else, this is a rookie quarterback with a bad offensive line going to face Denver, which is considered one of the better defenses, and he put up 32 points. Well, they put up 32 points. Now, obviously, there was that terrible interception and towards the last, I think, 3 minutes of the game, to where they turn the ball again. Rookie mistake. He's trying to make a play. I get it. So we're not going to harp on that. We're just talking about what happened in the game. And then from there, the kickoff after, to your point, when Jackson Dart scored, there was a kickoff. And then there were only 2 plays. There was 29 to Marvin Mims, and I think 24 to Cortland Sutton, and that was game. They kicked the field goal after that. To me, this is not necessarily on the rookie and what the offense is like. This is a colossal defensive collapse for a team that we thought they may have to figure out some things on offense, but we thought the defense was the strong point of this team. And all they needed was a stop throughout the whole fourth quarter. We're not just talking about the last play. Throughout the whole fourth quarter, they just needed one stop. That was it to kind of seal this game, to kind of probably seal this game up had they gotten just one stop. That takes away one possession where the Broncos don't more than likely don't score, and they walk away with another unexpected win. But alas, to your point, yeah, it looks like Jackson Dart is looking like they have a quarterback of the future. And running back. We could talk about the quarterback and running back tandem.
I want to talk Colts Chargers. Colts offensive line in this running game is absolutely elite. I love the play calling that I'm seeing from this team. Tyler Warren looks like the offensive rookie of the year. Man, what a player he has been for them. This defense flies around. This looks like one of the most complete teams in the NFL. Look, this is the number one offense in the league at 33 points per game. So I mentioned this in the intro. How good are the Colts, Alex? Is this a potential one seed in the AFC?
Yeah, as we're looking at it right now with where Baltimore has fallen to and, Buffalo, they have to play some other teams for me to believe that they're real. And now Kansas City, and if we're talking about them in catch-up mode, Indianapolis seems like the team that can kind of steady the pace and win out and probably perhaps get to 11 to 12 wins. That would probably be the number one seed unless we believe that Kansas City going to rip off about 7 or 8 in a row and then, you could catch them up there. But I think they kind of control their own destiny at this point, just remain consistent because this game was 38-24. It wasn't that close. They were up 17-0, I think, by halftime, or 17-3 by halftime. They were dominating the line of scrimmage. I don't want to hear about, nor do I care about the Chargers offense. That defense was there. I had been hearing about this defense, and from the opening gate, this wasn't like they got worn down. No, from the start of the game, the Colts were running through, they controlled the trenches, and you saw it was going to be a long day for that defense.
Yeah, and then on a side note, they need to retire those yellow unis. God, those were terrible. The ugliest uniforms I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, the Chargers, this team looked so good the first couple weeks of the season, and look, just too many injuries. It's just one of those teams. It kind of feels like the 49ers last year. Just so many injuries. It's hard to really see what this team could have been. The offensive line is just in shambles. They have no running backs left. They can't run the ball. And look, that was really their identity. Their identity of this team was going to be the offensive line in the running game and setting up the play action for Herbert to take shots downfield. They just can't do that with this offensive line. They've got 4 tackles that are injured. They've got practice squad guys starting their 5th and 6th string tackles in this game. It's just crazy. Herbert's been the most pressured quarterback in the NFL this year. It's starting to unravel a little bit for the Chargers. It's kind of unfortunate because we saw how good this team looked to start the year, and the injuries have just caught up to them. But look, I don't want to take anything away from the Colts because this Colts team looks like they're for real, and they are tough, man. They run the ball. They're, like you said, really good on the offensive and defensive line, and they're going to be a tough out. And I don't know, the Chiefs look like they're putting it together, so they might go on a run, like you said. But I think this Colts team is going to be in the mix because this does not look like a fluke to me at all. This team looks like they're for real right now.
Yep, and before you move on, my play of the game goes to Jonathan Taylor, 132 total yards and 3 touchdowns.
That's a good choice for the game ball. I've got mine I'll give out here in a little bit, but I want to switch to Vikings-Eagles. Look, through 6 games, the Vikings have already matched their loss total from 2024. Nothing about this team feels the same from last year. And I've said it and I'll say it again. This J.J. McCarthy pick might just haunt this team. Now, I know it's super early, and this guy could certainly turn out to be a great quarterback. It's too early to tell. But right now, the early results don't look good. And if they don't take him in that draft and they keep Sam Darnold, this team might be one of the best teams in the NFC again, but the quarterback position for them has been a mess. Carson Wentz is still terrible. KOC can't even save this guy. JJ, like I mentioned, he just can't stay on the field. And even when he did play, he didn't look very good. So they've got a serious issue at that position. The Vikings were great versus the run. I was actually really impressed with the way they bottled up the Eagles running game. But then the secondary got lit up like a Christmas tree. And Jalen Hurts goes 19 for 23, 326, and 3 touchdowns. When is the last time we saw a stat line like that for Jalen Hurts?
Well, it's not even just Jalen Hurts. And, I've heard some of the chatter that we need to give Jalen Hurts some credit here, which we will, because he had a perfect passer rating as well. I think the last time that happened was in 23 with Baker Mayfield when he was with the Bucks. We have to give him some credit there. I will say this. We have to still be honest about what we saw in that game. The Eagles kept trying to give that game away. Let's be very clear. The Vikings should not have hung around this long. And I know we want to give credit to them for bottling up the running game, but the Eagles' running game has not been good all year long. We just watched the other day Christian McCaffrey have 122 yards rushing. If I'm not mistaken, I don't even think Saquon Barkley has even reached 69 yards rushing in the game. So they bottled it up, yeah, but so has apparently then everybody else has too. I just think that's more on them. But we have to give credit to where credit's due. Obviously, they involved A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith with big time deep throws, not just catch and run throws, but big time deep throw, air yard throws by Jalen Hurts, something that he had been criticized for. So I will definitely give him credit there and helping them to overcome and win the game. But this game to me was still too close, and they were playing with their food all game long. And perhaps to the point of their quarterback situation on the Vikings, they win this game because the Eagles apparently did not want it as much as as perfect as Jalen Hurts' game was.
Yeah, the Vikings really, like I said, they were good against the run, but really the rest of this team didn't look very good. They didn't take care of the football. They were sloppy throughout this game. And like you said, somehow they managed to hang around and make this thing interesting when in reality it should have been a blowout. So you're right. That's a little bit concerning if you're an Eagles fan, because your quarterback has probably the best game we've seen from him in years, and you still have this relatively close win. So that is a little bit alarming, but Eagles find a way to get it done and get off that 2-game losing streak. It was a big win for them. Look, you mentioned it real quick. Christian McCaffrey, man, how good did he look in that game the other night? This guy is just a difference maker for them when he's healthy. And I don't know how deep this team goes. Like I mentioned with the Chargers, this team is dealing with so many injuries again this year. I don't know how much of a contender they are at this point, but I will say this. Coach of the year has to be Shanahan right now. Kyle Shanahan, with the way he has navigated this schedule early in the year, with all these injuries on both sides of the ball, so many key players out, and for them to just continue to find ways to win is really, really impressive. This is the most impressive coaching job I've seen from him yet. And we're talking about one of the best coaches in the league, but I've really been impressed with the way he has pieced together these game plans.
Yeah. And I know we're talking about Coach of the Year. I have a different one, but we're probably about 2 weeks away from what we'll call our midseason award, so I'll reveal it then.
Yeah, that'll be fun. We'll definitely give out some midseason awards here pretty soon. Look, let's jump to Rams Jaguars, the game in London. Probably disappointing for the London fans. I know they love their Jags over there, but the Rams blow out the Jaguars. Look, I just mentioned Shanahan. McVay is so good, though. This guy is so good. Puka's out. And they come out and go big. They run 12 and 13 personnel, something that we have almost never seen from a Sean McVay offense. And the Jags were completely caught off guard. Trevor Lawrence, once again, was awful in this game, missing easy throws, missing layups. I mean, yes, he did have some guys drop some passes, granted, but he wasn't very good in this game. And that Jags offensive line just got destroyed by the Rams front seven. Braden Fisk had 8 quarterback pressures in this game by himself. 7 sacks for LA. I mean, they were dominant up front. And look, this is a team that I think we both did. We both had questions about Stafford's health going into the year. There was all those reports during training camp about his back, and it was really concerning, especially with his age and some of the injuries he's had recently. So this was a team that I just didn't know what to do with as far as predicting. I knew that if Stafford was healthy, they were going to be dangerous, but I just didn't know what to expect from them. Well, right now he's staying healthy and looking good, and this team is dangerous.
Yeah, I had some critique on Matthew Stafford, specifically in that San Francisco game. I just felt he was missing some overthrows. But once again, even though Puka Nacua is out and he's emerging as a top 5 receiver, depending on where you want to put him, but they have a guy on that team who has proven time and time again that he can handle the load by himself. And Devontae Adams, another guy who probably could have been my guy for Player of the Week. On the Jaguars side, I guess the only good thing to say is that Travis Hunter scored.
Yeah,
he definitely didn't look like, in contrast to a guy that he had been compared to recently. If you guys know, they were at 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, where Jalen Hurts was and where Trevor Lawrence was this game. It was awful. It was awful.
Yeah, it's been way too inconsistent for him. And the thing that's got to be frustrating for Jaguars fans, we mentioned this the other day, is he makes throws sometimes that are just wow throws. He makes plays sometimes that make you say, wow. And the talent is so clearly there, but he's so inconsistent of a player, and he continues to be. a guy that you just don't know what you're getting week to week. You don't know what you're getting down to down, and it's just become a problem for this team because really at this point, as well as the team has played, he has really held them back. Now, like I said, some of this I got to put on the O-line here. They got absolutely destroyed in this game. It's not all on Trevor, but overall he has not played very consistent football. Like I said, we've seen flashes, but it seems like this guy's entire career has been made up on talent and flashes and not a whole lot of consistency from him. So yeah, got to be another frustrating performance from them. Quickly, I want to mention the Bears-Saints game because, like I said, Bears get their fourth straight win. And really the defense in this game was one of the most impressive things for me. I mean, they were lights out. And this defense is really starting to click. They have 15 takeaways this season. And as far as Caleb Williams, look, he never really got in a groove in this game. But the defense and the run game really helped him out. And this team is just finding ways to win games right now.
Yeah. Shouts out to Chicago, and it's not the leaps and bounds that I think people look at. And I think sometimes we put too much. I don't want to say pressure, but there's a level of expectation because of how other quarterbacks have come in that sometimes some of these things are a slow burn. I'm not referring to Sam Darnold or anybody else. I'm just talking about, or Baker Mayfield. I'm just talking about a rookie quarterback that's staying in the system consistently. Sometimes it's just a slow burn. You always hear me or Brad actually off air talk about, I don't talk about start judging quarterbacks until after 3 years. I may have a critique through the 3-year process, but I'm not calling anybody a true bust if I believe them. I only do that to Ohio State quarterbacks and Anthony Richardson, but I have to see 3 years to say good, bad, good, like to see how they progress and how they react to how the defense is reacting to them. And before we move on, I want to make two things. I want you to tell me who your guy is for Play of the Week. And I want to just quickly mention, because I know we didn't have it on the docket, but that Thursday night game between the Steelers and Bengals was very interesting. And with the way that we don't know what's happening with Baltimore right now at 1-5, I just saw that I think I got from one of my Ravens friends that they said they don't think he's coming, that the word is that he's not coming back after the bye in Lamar. So perhaps there's a shutdown piece going on there with Joe Flacco and the Bengals and what they're able to do, and Joe Flacco being a savvy veteran. That race can get very interesting between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'll say this. They're a legit threat to make the playoffs now. And this team was dead in the water just a couple weeks ago. And Mike Tomlin was absolutely right when he blasted the Browns for making that decision to trade Flacco in division to the Bengals. Because, look, like Tomlin said, you thought high enough of this guy to make him your week one starter, and then you trade him to a team that is struggling at quarterback in the division who desperately needed a veteran guy to help stabilize that team. And they instantly went from a team that couldn't get out of its own way to a team that all of a sudden looks like a team that can make the playoffs. They could absolutely get hot and rip off some wins here, and I kind of expect them to because Flacco is playing with so much confidence with those two big-time wide receivers. This is now suddenly a dangerous team. Not good for the Steelers, who looked like they were going to run away with this division. Now all of a sudden they've got another team in the race, and who knows about the Ravens? Obviously, they've got a big hole to climb out of. Lamar, if he can get healthy, anything's possible. We know how special of a player he is, but yeah, crazy what's going on in that division. I do want to mention one other game quickly here because if the Dallas Cowboys had a better record, Dak would be the heavy MVP favorite, and I don't think it would even be close. I think he'd be running away with this award if they were 4-2, whatever. If they were in the mix, there's no doubt he would be the guy because he is playing at an unbelievable level. He is hitting some prime years right now, and we might just look back someday and say this was the best year of his career, and it's going to get tossed in the garbage because the defense is garbage. I mean, absolutely terrible. And this team's probably only going to win 7 or 8 games. And it's really kind of a shame because Dak is just playing at an unreal level right now. And as far as Jaden Daniels, look, with this Washington team, I think the magic from last year looks like it's kind of fizzling out here a little bit for this team. I didn't pick them to make the playoffs for a reason. I thought this would be a little bit of a step back year. I thought last year kind of felt like a magic carpet ride. Jaden Daniels' health is becoming a concern. And look, I know none of these look like long-term injuries, thankfully, but this is something that you and I talked about when he got drafted out of LSU. I questioned his size and the play style because he's such a dynamic runner, but he's a reckless runner, and he's really not built to play like one. It's one thing when guys like Cam Newton and Josh Allen run around like that. It's a whole nother thing when a guy like Jaden Daniels does. This guy has to find a way to protect himself better going forward. So I love the player. I love the talent, and I think they'll be fine. I'm not saying they're going to be terrible this year, but I think it's going to be a little bit bumpier now that we've seen this team this far into the year. It's going to be a little bumpier for them this year.
I know that, his mother's been on Twitter saying don't compare him to RG3 or anything like that, but you can't help the fans. They have PTSD from this. Like, this is a thing they've gotten themselves hyped up before, thinking they had something after 1 year. And then the very next year, a lot of things started happening, even though some of those things were RG3's fault himself. But we're talking about protecting yourself and things like that. So there has to be, at least in terms of what we're hearing from his mother and other people, you have to understand the Commanders slash, and we will say Redskins because that's when they experienced that. You can even go all the way back to Joe Theismann. They have PTSD from this. So there's a reason that they hold their breath every single time Jaden Daniels hits the turf.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, my NFL game ball, Alex, is going to go to Micah Parsons. We didn't mention this game, but Micah Parsons was absolutely dominant. 9 quarterback pressures, 3 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss, and an absurd 43.8% pass rush win rate. He was unbelievable on Sunday against this Cardinals team, which, look, I'm just going to mention this briefly here before we shift to college football.
Yeah.
The Cardinals offense has looked better with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback the last 2 weeks. And I've said it and I'll say it again. They're going to trade Kyler Murray this offseason. It's time to move on. Something is clearly missing with this guy. And if you're the coaching staff, you have to be watching this offense with Jacoby Brissett, thinking to yourselves, what are we doing here? Because nothing against Brissett, but we kind of know what he is. And all of a sudden, the offense looks better than it has under Kyler. I think this is seriously something here, and I think it's going to happen this offseason. Let's shift to college football here because the Florida Gators, your Florida Gators, Alex, move on from Billy Napier. Look, we kind of all saw this coming. I think we knew this was coming. He was on the hot seat going into the season. The only thing that really saved him last year was they got on that winning streak. And so Florida felt like, I get it. Florida kind of felt like maybe they had a little momentum going into this year. You've got a young quarterback that they thought maybe was developing with Napier. It just went off the rails early this season, and they realized, look, it's not moving in the direction they wanted it to move. Napier went 22-23 overall in Florida. It's the worst record through 20 games of any Florida coach since 1950. And if people want to say, oh, it's unfair, no, it wasn't. It's not unfair. This guy, he had everything he needed. He had all the resources he needed for Florida to win at a high level. And I know the schedule's tough, but guess what? Everybody's schedule's tough in the SEC. Everybody's schedule's tough in the Big Ten. That's how this works, right? This is big boy football. So you can't make excuses. You got to go out there and get wins. And this is a Florida team that wanted to build through the high school ranks with Napier, which I think is a good model. But I think some of the things that he missed on was he just wasn't aggressive enough in the transfer portal. And I think that combined with the game management issues, just too many missed opportunities when they had some winnable games in front of them. This is a Florida program that made a big push in recent years with the NIL spending, upgrading the facilities, their sports nutrition, strength and conditioning, because this is a program that had really kind of fallen behind in that regard. And they made a big push to upgrade this program to get it up to the level it needed to be. So there was no excuses for Billy Napier, a huge staff. So they gave him everything he needed to win there. So unfortunately for him, it didn't work out, but this is a big time program. This is a big time opening, and the cupboard isn't completely bare because the one thing he did is he brought in a decent amount of talent.
Yeah.
There's still some holes on this roster, but there's something to work with here. And we know that Florida, what they're capable of with their resources, with the recruiting soil that they sit on. This is definitely a program that we've seen rise to the top when they get the right guy in place. Lane Kiffin is the obvious name. He's the favorite to take the job. Look, I think once he says yes or no, I think the search starts and ends with him. It's going to be interesting, though, because I have seen some reports that it's not a slam dunk that he takes this job. So I know Lane Kiffin's the guy. If it's not him, who are some other guys that you're looking at, Alex, that you think could fit this job?
I don't know. I've kind of zeroed in on him. Obviously, I mentioned Deion, but I really would. That's just more of the ties to Florida and then getting him over there from the West and bringing him back to the South to, in a sense, home to at least Florida in a sense. But the one thing we need to mention is the one that guy that won't be considered for Penn State, Florida State, or Florida is Cignetti, who signed a long-term deal with Indiana.
Yeah, and he's an absolute rock star, and they were smart to kind of lock him up. And look, I think that signing, by the way, is very telling of the modern era that we're in with college football. Because 10 years ago, A guy like
He don't
him, a
do that at
rising
all.
star, there's no way he stays in Indiana. There's no way. 10 years ago, there's no way he passes up an opportunity to go take a Penn State or Florida job or possibly a Florida State job. Those are all blue blood programs. There's no way he stays there. But things have changed. The NIL has changed the game, and the amount of money that these conferences are investing into these coaches and these programs, it has changed everything. And I think it's something to watch here because I do think Florida is a better job than Ole Miss. But I think that those jobs are actually closer than a lot of people realize. Let's jump to some of these big games. We saw some monster games in college football. Numbers 2, 5, 7, 10, 11, 20, 22, 23, 25 ranked teams all went down in college football this week. Absolutely crazy. Let's start in the SEC, Alabama, Tennessee. Get your cigars out, Alabama, because, man, this team is rolling. Dylan DeBoer is now 19-3 versus ranked teams. This is the guy that every Alabama fan was questioning. They all wanted him out. And now I think they're ready to wrap their arms around this guy because he has them playing at a really high level, and they look like maybe the best team in the SEC. Look, Ty Simpson, I'm so impressed with this guy, Alex. He is making the pre-snap reads, making smart checks, staying poised in the pocket, manipulating safeties with his eyes. He's playing like a veteran quarterback. Right now, he might be the most NFL-ready quarterback in the country. I think he's got to be the Heisman favorite. And I called out Tennessee as maybe the most overrated team in the country on the newsletter last week, guys. If you aren't already subscribed, by the way, sign up. It's free. I put out the newsletter with my picks, and I took Alabama to cover because I just didn't think Tennessee was for real. And look, Alabama feels like the best team in this conference, but here's my question, Alex. Is there an elite team in the SEC?
No, I don't believe there's any elite team. I think there's teams that we like you said, like Alabama. But if I'm Georgia, I know they beat them, but I'm not scared of Alabama. If I am Ole Miss, I'm not scared of Alabama. If I'm Texas, I'm not scared of Alabama. I mean, Texas is kind of on the outs right now, but I don't think there's any team that anybody is afraid of, nor coach that anyone's afraid of. We love Kirby Smart, but Georgia's look shaky now. They have a chance that I think Georgia, by the end of this season, I think Georgia can put themselves where we don't want to play them because they look like they can go on an upswing and start doing some damage and gonna start to get to feel more comfortable. But that's the same. I could turn around and say the same thing about Alabama. But so I don't know if there was a team. I think it might be Georgia by the end of the season, and I'm just giving the edge because they have that coach.
Even though Alabama and Georgia might be the two best teams in the SEC, this isn't Saban and Kirby's Alabama and Georgia. These programs don't look like those teams we saw a few years ago that were just head and shoulders above everybody else in this conference. This is the kind of conference right now where it feels like anybody can beat anybody on any given Saturday. Perfect case of that, Vanderbilt knocks off LSU. Look, this was a huge win. Vanderbilt beats them 31-24. They moved to 6-1 for the first time in a half century. And LSU's got problems. And look, that score does not reflect the actual play of this game because Vanderbilt controlled this game. And LSU's offense continues to be a problem. They have not scored more than 24 points against an FBS team this entire year. And we've got to have a conversation about Brian Kelly because, look, Brian Kelly is the same coach he was at Notre Dame. He's a steady winner who consistently loses big games. He's now 5-10 against ranked opponents at LSU. That is not going to get it done for this fan base right now. And look, his buyout at LSU would cost the school $53.3 million. And we talked about this in the offseason. We had an LSU insider on this podcast. We talked about the NIL money. We talked about this program financially. This is not Texas. This is not Ohio State. This is not Oregon or Texas A&M financially. They're not one of those programs. So this is going to be really interesting to see, Alex, if they pull the trigger and actually move on from Brian Kelly, knowing how much that could potentially hurt them in the NIL. And I think the most alarming thing about this game was that Vandy pushed around LSU. Like I said, the score is not indicative of what this game was actually like. Vandy controlled this game. They were the better team. They were the better coach team. Maybe the most impressive thing about this too, Alex, is that Vandy fans didn't even rush the field. They expected to win this game.
Yeah, I did as well. I mean, I know we didn't do our leading up to the weekend show. My fault, of course, but the Vanderbilt was somebody that I picked. I mean, it depends on how much grace that he's going to be given because as it came out, I can't think around week 3 or 4 that Nussmeier was dealing with that abdominal or something area, so he hit the torque and everything on his passes aren't going the way that they normally would. So that's a big reason. So perhaps he gets some grace there from the LSU alum and AD department and so forth. But so I don't think he's going to get fired in this year. But as far as the game, yeah, no, I was not worried about. I was betting Vandy money line all the way, which I did, and on top of that, my helmet sticker goes to Diego Pavia, 160 yards passing and a touchdown, then another 86 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. So he's my helmet sticker.
My thing is they've got what, Texas A&M coming up. I
Loss.
know that's going to be a big game. So let's if they lose another game, maybe two, they're not making the college football playoff. So
No. Oh no. Yeah, no.
at that point, I mean, are LSU fans going to be able to handle missing the playoff again? We talked about this in the offseason. This was a team kind of similar to Penn State. This was put up or shut up time. This was the kind of now or never year for LSU. That a lot of guys coming back. They made a big investment in the transfer portal. I think that Brian Kelly could be in serious trouble here in LSU. And if they find a way to put the money together, they might just get him out of town. Fascinating to see what happens there, because if that job opens up, wow, we're going to have a list of some serious blue bloods with some job openings this offseason, which is going to be wild.
Yeah, and let's just be clear. Their next 2 games back to back are Texas A&M and Alabama, and then at Alabama. They're going to lose both of those games. They're going to have 4 losses. If you're waiting for that, they're going to have a bad. They're not going to go to the playoffs, and they might end up, because I think the last game they play is Oklahoma, so that could be
They could lose
5
that.
losses, right? And that's what I'm saying. That'll be 5 losses, and then they'll be unranked as far as I'm concerned.
Man, all right. So all you LSU fans who just found another podcast to listen to, I apologize if you're still with us. I appreciate it. Georgia, Ole Miss. Man, this was a fun game, Alex. Georgia trailed Ole Miss for really big stretches, and it just seemed like Georgia just shrugged it off. They never seemed phased, even though they were down multiple scores in this game. It just felt like they knew they could move the ball on Ole Miss. And Georgia outscores the Rebels 17-0 in the fourth quarter. They pull away late, covered the 7.5. Thank you, by the way. And Gunnar Stockton was lights out efficient in this game. He is really starting to impress, Alex. 26 for 31, 289 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's going to be this week's college football helmet sticker for me. I was so impressed by this quarterback.
Yeah, the game, and this is what I was saying, which we were just speaking to. Like, there's no team that I think anybody should be afraid of, and I don't think Ole Miss. Now that we could talk about the debacle in the fourth quarter defensively and offensively, because you still can score and win by whatever. But Ole Miss, what they're not scared. I don't think they'll be scared to go anywhere. And obviously Georgia they will travel to wherever they have to travel to and do whatever they need to do. But if we're looking at Georgia, I want to just pull up their schedule real quick. Going forward, I believe they'll beat Texas, and then really the funny thing is, and shout out to our guy Quick, the last game of the season probably seems to be their next biggest game is going to be Georgia Tech at the Superdome, at the Atlantic. I'm not sure what they call it, the Atlanta Superdome at the end of the season. That's probably their next big game, because Florida, Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, they're not. I don't think they're afraid of any of those teams. So this is all full speed ahead unless Texas catches them slipping, looking ahead to that Georgia Tech game. And with the expectation Georgia Tech continues to win.
Yeah, shout out to Georgia Tech. There's a coach that I think needs to be mentioned for some of these big job openings as well. And I'm going to mention another one here in a second here, because the Friday night game, Louisville knocks off Miami. What a huge win this was. They beat Miami in the trenches, Alex. That's what was so impressive about this game, because we know how good the offensive and defensive line is for Miami, especially that Louisville D line beat up that Miami offensive line. That's what really impressed me. And we talked about coaches that need to be mentioned. Why is Jeff Brohm not mentioned for one of these big-time coaching job openings? I mean, look at this guy's record versus top 25 teams.
So the other thing is, to your point, that was unexpected. An unranked Louisville team beating the number 2 team in the country. I don't know. Miami people were probably standing on their heads because they know. And again, it's funny because perhaps Miami's just not. Some teams are not ready for the moment. This does not mean they're not making the playoffs. It's just talking about their schedule. When we looked at their games after Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, SMU, Syracuse, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Pitt, we all said they're going to go undefeated. there wasn't a game that somebody felt quote unquote scared of, that we thought they would be close, but not that they'd lose. And here they are losing to Louisville. And I think this is a team that perhaps, and I don't know if we want to talk about Mario Cristobal here, that might have been looking ahead at the same things that a lot of us looked ahead at and said, wait a minute, we've gotten through Notre Dame, South Florida, and Florida State. The rest of the road is easy. And perhaps it might have gone to their head. Who knows what was being said in that locker?
I took Louisville plus 13.5. I thought that they could compete with them. I thought Louisville was being a little bit underrated going into this game. Like I said, I think Jeff Brohm is a great coach, and he would have these guys ready to play. Carson Beck just had a complete meltdown. This is the worst we've seen him play all year. I think he had, 3 or 4 interceptions in this game. I mean, he was terrible. And hats off to Louisville, man. They came to play. I didn't think they would necessarily upset Miami, but I did think they'd find a way to keep this close.
Points.
Yeah, so big time win for them. And as far as Mario Cristobal, look, he does this every year. Every year. Going back to his days at Oregon, there's always 1 or 2 games that he shouldn't lose, that they find a way to lose. And it just doesn't surprise me anymore with him. USC Notre Dame, one of my favorite rivalries in all college football. The big takeaway here for USC is I think this program is close, Alex. I think they're close. Maybe not getting back to their, Pete Carroll days and winning championships. I'm not trying to say that, but I think they're close to getting back to being in the mix in the Big Ten here. And if it wasn't for 3 turnovers and some questionable calls by Lincoln Riley, they probably win this game. 2 of the biggest ones that stood out were those 4th down plays, both short yardage plays, situations. Neither resulted in them running the ball. Tried to get cute. I don't know what some of those play calls were. It cost them big, fumbled on one of them. But USC's biggest issue in this game, and I thought it might be, was they just couldn't stop the run. And they did a really good job versus Michigan, slowing down their running game. But Notre Dame, just too tough, too physical, too much depth in the running back room. But they were in this game. They were hanging around. And like I said, I think this program is getting closer to getting back in the mix in the Big Ten. They have the #1 recruiting class in the nation right now. And if I'm Florida or Penn State or soon to be Florida State, I'm making calls to see if there's a big enough check that we can write for Marcus Freeman to consider leaving Notre Dame. Because, look, even though if I'm him, I'm not taking either one of those jobs. Just for the record, if I'm him, I'm probably staying at Notre Dame. But, look, I think if you're one of these big-time programs, you have to make that call.
So let me ask you a question. Now, let's talk about Notre Dame, not necessarily Marcus Freeman, because this has been a big discussion. Can Notre Dame win out and still get in?
I think they can now. Because USC, getting that big win against Michigan, coming into this game ranked. I didn't think USC would be ranked coming into this game. That really saved Notre Dame's resume because they absolutely needed a marquee top 25 win. And let's face it, they're Notre Dame, right? They're going to get some benefit of the doubt because of the brand. And the 2 losses are very respectable losses, obviously against Miami and Texas A&M, 2 teams that might be 2 of the better teams in the entire country. They were both close losses. They didn't get blown out in either one of those games. They were right there. So I think Notre Dame will probably get the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I mean, as far as Marcus Freeman in this program, I don't know how he's not one of the top guys you call. Maybe he doesn't leave Notre Dame. I don't know.
Yeah,
he's got a pretty good deal there, and he's really got it rolling recruiting wise, financially. They've got all the finest meats and cheeses up in Notre Dame. But I don't know. If I'm one of those big programs, there's no doubt I'm at least testing the waters with Marcus Freeman because that guy is an absolute rock star in college football right now. A couple more games I want to get to real quick, Alex. BYU, Utah, the Holy War. This game is always fun to watch. Unforced errors by Utah, I think, really hurt them in this game. And, the Utes going forward on 4th and 1 from the 12-yard line in a tie game, I get it. But then going forward on 4th and 7 on your own 28, I thought that was a terrible decision in this game. They had costly false starts, delay of game penalties, and illegal substitution penalties. Just some key moments where they just continued to shoot themselves in the foot. A defensive holding flag that overturned a BYU turnover. Utah has to be sick watching the tape of this game. Look, I've always defended Kyle Whittingham. I think he's a great coach. But some of these in-game decisions, these 4th down decisions, he is costing his team wins right now with some of these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, look, somebody please beat BYU. I do not want to get to Selection Sunday and have a conversation about this team. I thought Colorado was going to do it. I thought Utah was going to do it. Iowa State, I hope you can do it so then they can also then lose to Texas Tech. And then hopefully Cincinnati stays, is still strong enough towards the end of the season to then beat them. And I believe UCF can beat them as well. I don't want them to. Do not want to get to a selection Sunday and we're having conversations about BYU the way we had about who was that last year? SMU. I don't want to get there. I don't.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Oh
Somebody
man.
please beat them so we don't have to have this conversation.
Oh man. Don't at me, guys. Look, okay, all you Cougars fans, don't at me for his hatred of BYU and the disrespect of this program, guys. All right, real quick, another Big 12 game here I wanted to get to quickly. Arizona State knocks off Texas Tech. This was a big time upset because Texas Tech was rolling, man. This team looked like they were going to run the table. They looked like the best team in the Big 12. Quite frankly, they looked so good. I actually thought that they looked like a team, and they still might, by the way, but they were looking like a team that not only could win the Big 12, but maybe make some noise in the playoff because they're big up front, both lines of scrimmage, tough, physical, well coached. But Sam Leavitt was awesome in this game. He made some big time NFL level throws in some big moments and showed some real. I mean, he was getting knocked around, was able to keep his poise and just throw strikes. I thought this was a great win for Arizona State because, like I said, I think Texas Tech has been the real deal this year in the Big 12. And once again, Alex, why is Kenny Dillingham not getting mentioned for some of these high-profile jobs? This is a guy who was a great offensive coordinator at Oregon, won the Big 12 last year at Arizona State, should have beat Texas in that college football playoff. This is a bright, young offensive mind in the sport right now. I think he's somebody to circle.
Yeah, it's quite possible. I think we're unfortunate. I don't want to say unfortunately, but I think what happens is, especially with the teams right now, Florida State, Florida, Penn State right now, and then possibly LSU. Let's just throw those four out there. We're gonna hear the typical names. You already mentioned Lane Kiffin, and we know the big elephant in the room for all of these teams, even though it'll be a retread for Florida, is going to be Urban Meyer. Because as soon Urban Meyer's name is going to come up every single time in one of these discussions until these guys say no. Like for instance, Signetti would have been a big name, but once he signed the deal, he stopped being talked about. However, until Urban Meyer comes out, and watch this, don't think for a second that Nick Saban's name will not be mentioned, even though he's been adamant about not returning. His name is going to pop up because of Florida, because of LSU, specifically LSU. Again, a retread for them, but a popular retread for them. If he want to. So there's going to be some stuff. And the name, when you asked me about this, and I know I'm going back, there was one more name I should have mentioned. Watch the name John Gruden. Watch that name. That's all I'll say. Watch the name John Gruden.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one big time because this is a guy that desperately wants to get back into coaching. I don't think the NFL wants to open the doors back up for him, which means he very likely could be looking at one of these big college coaching jobs. And even though he's been an NFL guy, look, you never know. He's a talented coach, a lot of experience, and he brings an energy that I think would resonate at the college level. So he would be a very fascinating hire for sure. Look, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, PGF Nation. Do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. Once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.